Bum 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 bum. Joanne, first on, of course, even on the weekends. I know you're getting ready for church, having your coffee, and listening to me, because you have joined, either intentionally or not, Coffee with Scott Adams. The best part of the day, except for the other parts that are good too. And now that you're all here, or at least many of you are here, it's time to join me in the simultaneous sip. Grab your mug, your cup, your chalice, your stein, your container, your glass, your receptacle of any kind that holds a beverage. Fill it with your favorite beverage. I like coffee. And join me for the simultaneous sip. Oh, what a fun day in the news it is, and on social media. I would like to first call your attention to the best thinking that I've ever seen on the internet. Who might that be, you ask? Where would I find the best thinking on the internet? Well, I just watched a podcast. It's a Jordan Peterson podcast. It's his own podcast in which he's interviewing Bjorn Lomborg. Now, Bjorn Lomborg is famous for talking about the economics of climate change, but he talks about the economics of all the big challenges, climate change being one of them, and then he ranks them based on economics. Now, if you want to hear the smartest two people in the world talking, it's actually crazy. Like, I didn't think I would listen to something that was over an hour long, but you can't stop listening. Listen to Jordan Peterson talking to Bjorn Lomborg. So if you want to find that, just Google Jordan Peterson and Bjorn Lomborg, Lomborg. I've tweeted Lomborg around before. Now here's what's special about it. I'm writing a book now in which a big part of the theme is that you can't really understand the world unless you understand certain disciplines. And there are certain disciplines that are more important than others in learning how to make decisions and how to think about the world. Jordan Peterson has obviously an expertise in the areas of psychology, but in talking with Jordan Peterson, we can see that he also has a firm enough understanding of economics. And I'll tell you, when you combine a firm enough understanding of the basic concepts of economics, you don't have to get down too low in the details, with an understanding of psychology and a general high IQ and understanding of science, you get something that you just don't get with other combinations of skills. So if you take somebody who's a great artist and you say, let's layer onto this a great understanding of literature, that person is not really designed to think effectively. But the trick is, and the bad part is, they think they are. So here's one of the most true and annoying things about the world. Everyone thinks they know how to think. We all think we have this thing called common sense. We all think we know how to think, but we do not. We do not know how to think. There are a few people who have pursued the disciplines that teach you how to do it, and those people do know how to think. Jordan Peterson's one of them. Bjorn Lomborg is another. Now, you could disagree with their conclusions because nothing is certain in this world, but when you hear the rational thought behind it, it's just mind-blowing because it's so completely different than anything you'll see on the internet. So check that out. All right, now that I've talked about good thinking, I would like to talk about some of the dumbest thinking that I've seen lately. And I surfaced a lot of this dumb thinking with a dumb idea of my own, which might be dumb or might not be, but I'm not really qualified to know. And so I asked the following question yesterday on the internet. I said, would it be possible to take CO2 out of the air and through a chemical reaction turn it into some kind of, concrete or brick-making thing that you could turn into bricks? And I said make them like Legos. And when I said like Legos, I don't mean plastic Lego pieces. I mean something like a brick that can fit together with another brick so it's easy to build stuff with them. Now, a lot of people, whenever let me tell you, I have a history of asking this type of question. So for years I've been asking questions that go like this. Would it be possible to do X? Typically the answer I get on the internet is 30% of the people say, not only is it possible, but here's a link to a company that's already doing it. That'll be about 30% of the people. 70% of the people will say, you idiot, that's not possible. At the same time, the other people are pointing me to links where it's already being done. Now, I would like to mock, in the name of Dale, the worst comments that I got. When I say the worst, I mean people who do not think like Jordan Peterson or Bjorn Lomborg. If I may, I would like to invite Dale to imitate the comments that bothered me the most in terms of not being rational to my question, could CO2 be harvested from the air and turned into bricks that you could build stuff with? And the comments that I got that bothered me the most are, and I quote, ho, 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 Scott, CO2 is plant food. It's plant food. Do you want to starve the plants? Let's discuss. Yes, CO2 is plant food. Yes, greenhouses pump CO2 into the greenhouse because more is better for the greenhouse. And if that were the only variable in the entire universe, you would be right, Dale. CO2 is plant food. End of discussion. End of discussion. The more the better. So I've been tweeting back to people and asking them if their culture has the concept of too much. You've heard of cultures, there are primitive cultures and some animals, I guess, who don't have the concept of zero. So if you can imagine some cultures so primitive, they don't really have a concept of zero. But apparently on the internet, there are a lot of people who don't have the concept of too much. Now, if it's true that CO2 is causing warming and that the warming could become too much, then yes, you could feed the plants until you destroyed the planet with heat. Because at some point, there's too much. If you don't understand that too much plant food could ever be too much, under any scenario, you do not belong talking on the internet. Now, others say that what happens if you take too much CO2 out of the atmosphere? If you got too good at it, the plants would die. To which I say, I think we would figure out to slow down before that happened. And according to the scientists, we could take a whole lot of CO2 out of the air before we put a dent in what they imagine is they predict is the warming. So the dumbest thing that you'll ever hear is CO2 is plant food. Please stop saying that. It just is so dumb. It's true. It's 100% true. But saying it acts as though there's only one variable in the world, right? It's sort of like saying you can't drown because people drink water. It's sort of like saying that. Yeah, I know analogies are not persuasive. That's what you're going to say next. But the point is, I'm making a point that most things have a level that is too much. If you think CO2 is the only thing that doesn't have a too much level, well, say that. If you can back that up, that might be a point. But if you think there might be a concept of too much CO2, stop saying CO2 is plant food, end of story. It's dumb. Here's what other people said. When I said, could you take CO2 out of the atmosphere and build a brick? They said, oh, yes, you can, Scott. It's called a tree. It's called a tree. Okay. I don't think if you're going to build a house, you don't start by planting a tree. Do you? Because it seems to me that time is a variable. All right? You don't plant a tree to build a house. You might use a tree that's already grown. You might plant trees because planting trees is good for a variety of reasons. But if you wanted to scrub CO2 out of the air, planting a tree is not a substitute, at least not a perfect substitute, for scrubbing CO2 out of the atmosphere and making bricks. Now, some people say, my God, Scott, how dumb of you. It would take way too much energy to convert the CO2 into something useful. Now, of course that's true. So it's true that as far as we know, nobody's been able to scrub CO2 out of the air at a reasonable cost in energy that wouldn't cause more CO2 in the production of the energy than it would benefit. But here's the thing. Couldn't you say that or something like it for every new technology? Wasn't it true that nothing worked until it did? Now, some have said, I saw a skeptic say that somebody who was pulling CO2 out of the air and turning it into plastic, that you need to remove an amount of air that's the size of the volume of the Empire State Building to create a little piece of plastic this much. Now, if technology never improved, I would say, well, we're done. But it seems to me that all the companies that are working on this problem have certainly considered how much energy goes into it. And there are quite a few people who are funded and working on this. Is it possible that everyone working in this area has not thought of what you trolls on the internet have thought of, that there's too much energy involved? I have to think they all thought of that. I have to think that 100% of the people working on this problem have thought of that first. It's not the thing that they all forgot. I will guarantee you that everyone working on this field of changing CO2 into something useful, whether it's jet fuel or plastics or sneakers, and all those things are happening, by the way, I would guess with a high degree of certainty that 100% of those people have considered the energy usage as their top priority, because that's the problem they're trying to fix. Speaking of Bill Gates, somebody just mentioned him. One of his companies, and I forget which one, is involved in turning CO2 into jet fuel, which is an especially good process if you can make it work, because jet fuel is one of those things that you can't use solar power to power your jet. So if you could turn CO2 into jet fuel at a reasonable energy use, it would be a great idea. Now here's the thing. Do you think that Bill Gates, who invested in that company, didn't think about the fact that it would use more energy to create than it would be worth? Do you think that Bill Gates, or even whoever is investing for him, didn't have that question in their head? So I get what you're saying, that we're not yet able to do it, But the fact that there are so many people working on it certainly suggests that, number one, they thought of this problem, and number two, they have enough hypotheses or directions or things to test that they think they can beat it. So it seems to me loserthink to say that the early version of something doesn't work and therefore it can never work because we don't know how to solve this problem when everybody working on it knows that's the problem. That's the problem they're solving, is the energy imbalance. All right. So there's that. I tweeted something today that caused some fairly massive cognitive dissonance, which is always fun to look at because you can see how people signal their cognitive dissonance. And I'm going to read my tweet so that you can get all of its goodness in its exact form. And it was a response to a tweet in which Judah Maccabees, that's his Twitter name, talked about some statistics that show that the GOP, in particular, used to care a lot about lying, but in recent years, very recent years, they don't care that much at all. So Republicans went from caring a lot about lying to not really caring that much in politics. So specifically, we're talking about politics. And so Judah, not his real name, said, to clarify, talking about that poll, this is an amazing statistic, not just because of the drop, that's the drop in how much they cared about lying, but because it suggests a large number of Republicans think Trump is a liar and have decided that honesty must not be that important. So that's his assumption about what Republicans think. I replied to that by saying, it suggests that Republicans understand the news is fake, the other side is lying all the time, and directionally true hyperbole plus winning is better than technical honesty and losing. And what did people say about that? Well, let me talk about that first. So which of these statements I just make are not true? Is it true, this is my tweet, that Republicans understand that the news is fake? That's true, right? Republicans understand that the news is sometimes inaccurate, it's out of context, it's fake. So the entire canvas that everybody's working on is artificial and fake. It's all lies. And then I said the other side is lying all the time, meaning Democrats. Is that true? Yeah, it's true. It's true that both sides are lying all the time. They leave out context, they exaggerate, they use hyperbole, they use fear when it's not really the right place to use it, etc. So that's true. And then I said directionally true hyperbole, meaning lying but in the right direction. So an example of that would be if you said the immigrants coming across the border are raping and killing more than regular people, but it turns out that they're just raping and killing an average amount. It still gets you to the same place. You don't want any raping and killing, so if you could have less of it, everybody'd be better off. So I think you all agree with that. And I said that winning is better than being technically honest and losing. I think everybody agrees with that too. Would you rather be alive, or would you rather tell the terrorists the truth? Well, I would rather be alive. And I would lie to a terrorist to save your life too. Because I would rather you be alive than I tell the truth to a terrorist. So there are plenty of reasons why the truth is the worst tool for the job, and politics is certainly the best example of that. So how did people respond to me saying a bunch of things that are just obviously true? It's obviously true that the news is fake. It's obviously true both sides use hyperbole. And it's obviously true that getting a good result is better than a bad result. All true stuff. Now, it also blows apart one of the most strongly held beliefs on the left, that the president's lying is hurting the country. And when I point out that it's just the entire context is everybody lying, so in that context, the best you can do is at least get a good result, It's hard to argue against that. So how do they argue when they have no argument? They do it this way. LOL! Look at this guy. LOL. Ha! I thought his cartoon characters were just characters, but it turns out they're just versions of himself. Wah, wah, wah. LOL. So, when you see the LOL without a reason, it's because they don't have one, but they're sure they do have one. They just can't really quite verbalize it. All they know is that their worldview got blown apart by my tweet, because nobody can really argue with the point that both sides are lying all the time. That's hard to argue with. Nobody can really argue with the fact that the news is fake on both sides pretty much all the time, either at least by leaving out context all the time. Those are hard to argue with. So instead, you get the LOL. My favorite one, here's my favorite critic this morning. So in response to that tweet in which it's just completely true and everybody agrees with it, here's what somebody says to my tweet that's completely true and everybody agrees with everything I said. You're better than that, Scott. You're better than that. To which I say, I'm definitely not better than that. I just did that. I'm definitely not better than the thing I just did, because the thing I just did is exactly how good I am. People are not, and I talk about this all the time, you are not your good thoughts. Your good thoughts are not who you are. What you do is who you are. So if I do something, that's who I am. You know, it may not be the whole picture because I do more than one thing. But what I do, that's who I am. It's not my good thoughts. Those are not who I am. And then I left them a link to a copy of my book, Win Bigly, in which I show that I have been paid a large amount of money to write on this topic. So there. I've noticed that Beto O'Rourke is being highly considered by the Democrats to run for president. Here's what's interesting about Beto. Now, Beto is an adult white male, and under normal situations, I would say to you, there is no way that Democrats will support an adult white male, because they're sort of the party of we don't like adult white males. But there's one exception. If that adult white male is young and good looking. If he's sexy, what does that say for the party of women that is also the party of the majority of LGBTQ folks? You have this weird situation where the Democrats are sort of toying with a boy toy as a candidate. Now, who would they rather talk about? Now think about this. The Democrats would like to have a president that they would like to focus on and talk about for 4 to 8 years. Who would they like to focus on and talk about? It's just their job. Let's say your job is the news. Who do you want to think about and talk about? How about a good-looking, tall white guy? It feels to me like Beto O'Rourke is being pushed forward for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with his policies. Am I wrong about that? This seems entirely boy toy related to me. It just seems, Scott, you're better than that. Yeah. Now, let's talk about the president and Congress. I tweeted around a Joel Pollack article that you all should read. I just tweeted that a few minutes ago about the president and the potential for find a middle ground with Congress. And with this whole wall situation, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it wrong to say that Democrats and Republicans already agree on the wall? It's just that we have a branding problem and a political problem? Because Republicans would say, we need a wall wherever it makes sense to have a wall, and then we'll use other methods where we don't need a solid wall. Democrats would say, well, sure, you could have a wall in a few places where it makes sense to have a wall, but we don't want a wall where it doesn't make sense to have a wall. Those are identical views. And they both want to spend money to get it done. The only thing that's different at this point is the way they're referring to it. Is it a fence or a wall? So I would like to propose the following compromise. We don't call it a fence and we don't call it a wall. We'll call it a combination of a wall and a fence, or a Wence. W-E-N-C-E. No, we're not building a wall. We're not building a fence. We're building a Wence. A Wence is part wall, wherever it makes sense to have a wall, and part fence, wherever it makes sense to have a fence. Does a fence make sense? Oh my God, that rhymes. If your name is Pence, do you want a fence? It makes sense. Hence, let's get ourselves a Wence. Now, I don't think that this idea has any, probably doesn't have any legs at all, except that it's way fun to say it, isn't it? I just realized this might be stickier than I think. When I said combine a wall and a fence and make it a Wence, how many of you had to say that out loud where you were? All right, here's the honest question. Wherever you are, did you say out loud the word Wence? As soon as I said, combination of wall and fence is a Wence, did you say it out loud? Because if you did, it's sticky. If you didn't, then it just passed over and will have no effect. Commence the Wence. It rhymes with everything, doesn't it? A Wence, it's like a pence. I didn't. No. People are saying no, they did not say it out loud. One said yes. No. Okay, so most of you did not say it out loud. So that would indicate that it is not viral. All right, I have a suggestion for fixing immigration, Southern immigration. Are you ready for this? This is my suggestion for fixing immigration in a way that everybody will agree, with an app. And it goes like this. Suppose you had a job app that would-be immigrants can apply for jobs on the app. And these would be people who are living south of the border, they're Mexican or they're Central American, and they would like a job in the United States, and they want to apply for it. So imagine there's an app. So if they have a friend who's got a smartphone or they can find an internet connection somewhere, they can apply. But it would have the following conditions. They can't apply for a job unless it's been open for 1 month for Americans only. So the only jobs that are available are ones that haven't been filled for 1 month, and you'd have to be able to demonstrate that in some way. Now imagine that the app allows people to negotiate the language difference, so there's some translation or whatever, but they can apply for a job and line one up so that if they can get to the United States, there's already a job waiting. Now that solves the first problem of are they contributing more than they're taking out of the system. The second thing is that they would also be able to use the app to negotiate housing. So they might find, let's say, 2 other immigrants who also wanted a job at the same, let's say, big farm, and they would figure out that they could share a room. So be maybe 3 of them in a room, whatever. So the app would figure out before they came across the border, they would have a job lined up, a economical place to stay, transportation to get there, and then the last thing I think is health care. So perhaps there's a way to have temporary health care just for the benefit of the immigrant community, just their own sort of internal deal, and maybe they pay for it. Maybe it costs them $50 to, a month or something, and maybe it only covers the biggest stuff. So it's possible it only covers the real big stuff, but they, use a doctor on demand or something for the little stuff. Somebody says it sounds like H-1B visas. A little bit. So it's sort of the poor man's version of an H-1B visa. So the idea is this, that you could have unlimited immigration. So that's, if the people on the left like that, it would be unlimited so long as people can demonstrate that they can have a job, a place to stay, a way to get there, and at least enough health care that they're paying on their own for the emergency stuff, the big expensive stuff. Could you get to a point fairly quickly where every immigrant is value added? And then if you could get to that point, the question of eventual citizenship, etc., you can really kind of put those off indefinitely because everybody would be coming in with a legal status and you'd be able to track them, you'd know what they're doing, and everybody would be doing something good. And so that's an idea I'm putting out there. So what can't you solve with an app? Nothing. So a lot of people have been saying we should hire the immigrants to build the wall. I have also said things like that, but usually joking. Here's why you can't hire immigrants to build the wall. Are you ready? It's all done with big equipment. The wall as it is designed is pretty much one guy with a crane and a couple of guys saying, over here, put that, there's like a backhoe and a crane, and that's about it. So it's not actually that labor intensive, weirdly enough. Yeah, I don't think you need much labor to build the fence because it's mostly big equipment stuff. You need cranes and backhoes and, it's not like you need guys with shovels. You don't really need that. Cost is in the materials. That is correct. It's a materials thing, mostly. Why don't they have sponsorship of immigrants? That's a good question. What about sponsorship? What about the sponsor takes responsibility for the, health care of the immigrant or something about them so that they are more likely to be economically positive? All right. Well, now correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of you have used this term Wence. For a term that isn't sticky, a lot of people are using it. Let's build the Wence. All right. I'm just looking at your comments because they're kind of interesting at the moment. All right, that's all I got for now. I will talk to you later.